Gonna make a quick video just about houses and computers on the future, or basically online real estate in the virtual world, and when and why I believe it will eventually become more valuable than real life property. Possibly not for the same amount of space, but I think in general it will become more valuable than real life property. What I mean by this is, for example, the average house online may be worth $60,000, and the average house in real life may be worth $55,000. Now, at this point, the online house might be 7 times larger than the same house in the real world. But if that is now the average house, then the average house price is this price, for example. Anyways, here's the first reason why I think that house prices will be higher online than they will be in the real world. First of all, so with an online property, for example, if you and I to live in an online world, and if you play any online games, you'll see that once they've patched all the errors that can occur and fixed all the graphical errors and script errors and such, anything that's online, or like an online building, an online room, or an online thing, doesn't require maintenance, or something that you have saved to a hard drive doesn't require maintenance. All it requires is space on a server or several servers, like a backup server, and space on a hard drive, and it will continue to function in the same way. You wouldn't need to maintain it like you would a normal house. For example, in this house here, I have to clean, cook, iron, and do all kinds of things to stay alive. Whereas in a virtual house, everything will be perfect forever. I won't need to repair anything unless, for some reason I want to make that. So that's one of the first factors that will make houses on the virtual world more appealing. And I also think that, yeah, right now it's hard to imagine that there are some virtual properties that have sold for a lot of money. I think the city of Amsterdam sold for quite a lot of money because someone recreated it, and there's a few online games that have people have designed entire planets or bought them and sold them, and there are online games where people have bought real estate on there and actually sold it for more. So there's definitely a market in it already. What's limiting the market right now is that the graphics of virtual reality and the sensations you experience of virtual reality aren't as good and aren't as worth investing in as real life. That's sort of changing over. We're seeing a lot of people with iPods and iPhones and playing all kinds of different games and living more in the online world than in the real world, or in the real physical world, sorry, or the normal world, the non-digital. But I think within maybe 5 to 6 years, this is going to change in terms of the graphics and the speed at which we can play a game. So I believe in about maybe 6 years we'll be able to have virtual reality that has the same more or less level of graphics as the real world, and also that you can play at the same sort of pace that you can play. Sorry, that you can live in the real world. So, for example, if you go on a virtual reality simulator now, you'll probably find that there's a lot of screen lag and such, that it doesn't really match the pace of the real world. People get dizzy. There's a lot of errors at the moment with virtual reality software that don't exist in the real world. But I think, yeah, probably within 5 to 6 years we'll have patched a lot of these errors. But what we won't have is, a virtual world that is like the real world. So I think in about 10 years or maybe 12 years, we'll start getting like sensory things. So we'll start being able to have smells and tastes and feelings. I don't know how developed they will be, but I think in 10 to 12 years that is achievable. But I don't think it will replicate perfectly this world. I think by then, though, it may start becoming more appealing as internet speeds will increase, storage speeds will increase, and it will become viable to own a piece of property on the internet or on virtual space. because yeah, whilst you might not be able to experience as much as you can here, it will probably be a lot more perfect a world you can live in, and your house, like I said, will never need maintenance and such. But I think it will also be a thing of the sensations that you can experience online won't be as good as the real world, but they'll be sufficient to live in, and you'll also be devoid of a lot of unpleasant sensations whilst you're on the online world. So in this time, I think is when the properties will start becoming more viable on the virtual world. They'll also become probably higher definition than they are in the real world, so you'll be able to make very, very fancy things, and be able to replicate extremely fancy artwork that would degrade in time in the real world, which will never degrade on the online world, as long as you back it up and have a few backup copies, basically. And so this, I think, is the time where they'll just start climbing up. People see that it is a viable thing that you can do. Another factor is that houses can be designed to be a lot bigger. You can design a house online, I'd say, faster than you can make one in the real world. And like I said, the one in the real world will eventually crumble, you'll have to repair it, you'll have to pay tax on it. I don't know if that'll happen with ones online. Maybe they'll make it so you have to pay tax like it was a real house, because for all intents and purposes it might be. So yeah, I'd say in 12 years or something like that, it'll start becoming a more realistic proposition, and people will take it more seriously, and actually consider, well, why don't I get an online house? I think maybe 5 to 10 years after that, so I'm saying 17, maybe to 23 years, we won't have mastered the sensory thing. We won't be able to upload our minds to computers or our minds to a mainframe, but we'll be able to replicate basically everything we can do in the real world on computers. We just won't be able to transfer ourselves into them yet. So we'll be able to access them through our bodies, probably with the same intensity or more intensity than we can in real life. The definition will be much better, it'll be seamless, and yeah, living in this space would probably be more pleasant than real life. Probably have computers then that can design houses, that can dynamically design houses, and make houses that are, say, or properties that are, say, 50 times bigger than the ones that you buy in the real world for the same price. This is when it will not only become completely viable, but preferable, I think. So yeah, in 17 to 20 for year 22 or 23 years, I would say that buying a house online or a virtual property will become, like I said, not just more viable, but just a better decision in general, in terms of quality of life. Then I think maybe in 30 years, or maybe 35 years, when we can upload our brains into computers and replicate everything, it will definitely be a bigger market than the real world market, just because if we have a bunch of pollution and such in our world, or any problems. The thing is, with our world, we can have problems, we can create problems, and we can live in problems. On a virtual world, you can make it so there are no problems. So not only are you buying the property, and it's 50 times bigger than a property you'd imagine on Earth. You can get your dream property for the same price as you could get a property here, or let's imagine at $50,000 you could buy 20 hectares or 40 hectares of land, say, with a mansion on it, and all the amenities you could imagine, right in whatever kind of environment you want, whether it be a city environment, whether it be in the middle of a desert, in the middle of a jungle, wherever you want it to be. But you don't have to have any of the drawbacks in living in that environment. You could filter out, say, for example, traffic from the city, noise from the city. Air pollution wouldn't exist. So you could have it so when you breathe there, you feel refreshed constantly. Makes it far more appealing than the real world. I think that initially there'll be some, I don't know, maybe some sort of backlash against people buying properties online and these kind of virtual properties. I think there'll be a massive backlash of people who think it's unnatural, or think that, for example, there'll be investor fears such as, well, what if the servers go down? What if there's a big EMP and it destroys electromagnetic impulse, and it destroys all of the data that we've collected, or it just wipes out the server for a small amount of time and erases the data. That's a legitimate thing. There will probably be a lot of power shortages in the future if we don't sort out renewable energy, and yeah, this as well would lead to people not wanting to buy a virtual property, because what's the point of buying one if you can't access it? It's like me buying a property 50 miles deep into the jungle. I can't get there. It might cost me, let's say, $1,000 for a 50-hectare property. I'd probably buy that because, to be honest, that's worth it, and maybe in the future it'd be accessible. But if it was never going to be used for anything, and it didn't look like in the next 50 years it could ever be accessible or usable, I wouldn't buy it, because I'd just be wasting $1,000 for nothing. And this is probably one of the reasons, one of the things that will put people off buying virtual properties. Another is, I think there'll be a lot of die-hard people who don't want to live in the virtual world, who lived all their lives in the real world and have started to, like me, for example, my generation, who've lived a lot of time in the real world, might think there's something kind of missing, even though it's exactly the same, not even the same, maybe better in all or most aspects, but maybe they'll feel like it's missing a soul or missing a human component just because it's not the normal real world, because it's the virtual world. It's like a conceptual fear rather than a real fear, if that makes sense. But yeah, anyway, those are my reasons why I believe in the future virtual properties will become viable and, yeah, more common than, you know, actual material properties. Because the main points are they'll probably be better um, than real properties. They'll probably be bigger than real properties. They'll never necessarily need maintenance, and you'll be able to choose what level of noise and what level of environment, what kind of environment you're in these properties. And yeah, the virtual worlds they're in will probably have better graphics than the real world, and probably have better sensations. You'll probably feel more pleasure in them, because you don't have to endure any of the negatives of the real world, and only the positives that the real world could give you. Anyway, that was my video on virtual houses in the future. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed.